Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today. So I want to introduce to you Zvi Harpaz and Boaz Shalgi. They are part of TourMeApp, a wonderful program that we are excited to talk about today. But more importantly, what we're going to do is talk about the things that are going on currently on the ground in Israel today. The last several days and really the last week have been very interesting. Exciting times, but not in a fun way. Scary for those that are there. And I know many Christians around the world have been praying for Jerusalem, for the peace of Jerusalem, and for Israel and the surrounding areas. And we are instructed biblically to do that. So I wanted to take a few minutes and talk to Zvi and Boaz and let them talk about what their experience is on the ground with everything that is going on, and for them to be able to tell us what life is like, what they're experiencing, and to talk a little bit more about TourMeApp as well. So that being said, Zvi.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Good afternoon for those of you that are stateside. It's 11:05 p.m. here in Israel. My name is Zvi Harpaz. I'm an Israeli. I was brought up for the first 10 years of my life in Israel. Then, because of my parents' job, I moved to Chile for 2 years, Guatemala for 3 years, in the US for 3 more years. I came back, did my military service in the Air Force, and became a tour guide and have been guiding for the past 32 years. I guide in English, Spanish, French, Portuguese, and some Mandarin Chinese. And those of you that will be dealing with TourMeApp, you will see me in English, Spanish, and Portuguese for the most part. I'm married. I have 3 boys and a 9-year-old boss. My first 2 boys are from my prior marriage. I'm married now to Meirav, and we have the 2, a boy and a girl, as I said. We live in a place called Kfar Saba, which is 16 miles northeast of Tel Aviv. And I'm going to pass the mic on to Boaz, but I can tell you it's been hectic here the last few days. And believe it or not, I'm actually sitting right now in our safe room / bomb shelter. And on one hand, I'm hoping that no siren goes off so as to interrupt us. On the other hand, if it does, you'll see everybody coming into here. We'll close the room, and you'll be getting first-hand glimpse of how things look like a couple of times in the last few days. Boaz, go for it.
Okay, very good. Can you all hear me? Yeah?
Yes.
All right. So Boaz Shalgi, my name. I'm 53 years old, born and raised in Israel, served in the Israeli military in the infantries for 3 years, and then 20 more years on reserves. Married to Maggie, who is originally from Sweden, converted to Judaism, became Jewish. We have 3 kids. About 12 years ago, we moved from Jerusalem to Galilee, way north in Galilee. So unlike most Israelis, I'm actually experiencing a very quiet time here now. The missiles range don't get all the way to Galilee, so everything I know is from the news and from speaking to Tzvika. But Israel is a small country, and sometimes things can develop in the south. And if it's in the north, it's only 5 miles away from where I live. So like I said, you never know where you're going to be when things happen. My 2 older ones have already finished their military service, and my youngest, who is 19, his name is Elijah Eliah. He'll start his military service, Lord willing, in 2 months from now. Um, yeah, we have a very interesting program today where we're going to share about what's happening in Israel. And I'm sure that even if you watch the news at home, it doesn't always do justice, not with the truth, not even sometimes with the actual facts. So anything that you want to know about what's going on, about the culture, about the war, about, I would even say, semi-civil war happening in Israel now between the Jews and the Arabs, then Zvi and myself are here for about an hour to try and answer all your questions.
So, Zvi, Boaz,
Yes,
can
sir.
you guys tell us what started this particular incident? So, I know it's been going on a long time, and we can go back to Genesis and see. But what happened a little over a week ago that really set things into motion that escalated into where we are now?
Can mind if I go first, Boaz?
Go ahead.
All right. Well, first of all, it didn't start a week ago. It started more like a month and a half ago,
Okay.
just before Ramadan, with an area that is called in Jerusalem, a neighborhood that is called Sheikh Jarrah. And some of you may have seen in the news and read that Israel is trying to evict some Palestinians that are living in that area. And there was a district court ruling to evict them, and they appealed and are waiting now for a Supreme Court ruling. And since the appeal, there have been demonstrations over there constantly, primarily on every Friday before the onset of Shabbat. And so some of these riots actually got to a point where there was some push and shove on both sides, Israeli police, the protesters, and so on. Just let me, put in parentheses the fact that the reason for actually the eviction, it's simply landlord versus tenant issues. It's not anything political. It is somebody whose lease has come up and who doesn't pay the rent. But the thing is that the media, and unfortunately the Arabs that are whizzes at manipulating the media, have managed to twist it in such a way to make us being Israel, look bad, that we are kicking people out. Now, the background to Sheikh Jarrah itself is that prior to the War of Independence, that area was in the hands of Jews. When the Jordanians took over in 1948, then the Jews that were there were killed / expelled / disowned and dispersed. And only following the 6-Day War in 1967, with the unification of Jerusalem, people started coming back and claiming there was, during the Jordanian rule, there was no legal protection for landlords. And when Israel came back, the court granted them their prior owned homes and lands. Having said that, the issue continued, and it started gaining more momentum. And then Ramadan started, and Israel because of some bad decision, decided to limit the amount of people and to barricade the steps leading to Damascus Gate, which is the main entrance into the old city, and prevent Muslims from congregating there, especially in the evenings during the month of Ramadan, after the iftar meal, when they break the fast. That, of course, caused for some riots that also expanded up to the Temple Mount. And again, things escalate. And the more they escalate, Israel is in a dilemma, because now we have to, first of all, prevent riots. On the other hand, allow religious freedom and access to the Temple Mount. But things, like I said, escalated. Riots went on the Temple Mount. Muslims started throwing rocks. I mean, I'm not talking about little stones. I'm talking about rocks and sticks and you name it, fighting against police that actually went up there. And everything is nowadays televised. We each have a full television station in our phones. So a lot of it gets immediately released to the media, the social media, and it gains a lot more momentum. To top it all, on the last day of Ramadan, also coincided with what is called Jerusalem Day. And Jerusalem Day is another volatile day because the Jews celebrate the reunification of Jerusalem following the 6-day war. And what they do is usually march from Damascus Gate to the Western Wall and have a celebration over there. And of course, they do it primarily. Orthodox Jews, a lot of them with, of course, with Israeli flags, and it's like putting a red flag against, to a bull in a bullfight. Things were so tense that at 4 p.m., rather than go through Damascus Gate, they changed the route, had them go in from Jaffa Gate to the Jewish Quarter. And at 5 p.m., Hamas, trying to gain popularity, issued out a message that if the flag procession was going to continue, they are going to fire at Jerusalem at 6 p.m. At exactly 6 p.m., they were true to their word. They fired 7 missiles towards Jerusalem, causing for everybody to disperse. And of course, that for them was a very, very powerful picture that was televised all over. And that requires Israel to react. And that from that moment onwards, things escalated drastically. I just have a tendency to talk a lot, so I'm just going to pass this on to Boaz right now. Take it from once Hamas fired to Jerusalem. Okay?
Yeah, sure. Well, that happened, and first it turned into an exchange of fire, but it escalated pretty quickly, and now we're finding ourselves in the midst of a semi-war, I would say. And soon we'll get also to details that you'll probably be interested in. But I also want to give you just in a few words another aspect of what Zvi has been talking about, and that is the eschatological aspect of this story. We can always talk about getting into the old city, blocking the Damascus gate, or this or that. But in the end of the day, this is something that the Bible predicts, from thousands of years ago. And it doesn't really matter who does what, because when you look at it, these are minor things. Wars don't break out on who is sitting where. Only to tell you that this is meant to be, and we're just trying to find reasons. We have to just go to the Bible. The Bible will give us all the reasons for why this is happening today.
That's an excellent point. That is an excellent point. So if I may, there has been some escalation, or I've seen in the news that even yesterday and today, starting to see rockets fired, not just from Gaza, but also from Lebanon, and maybe today even from Syria. Boaz, I know that's more your area. So can you guys speak to that for a moment?
Yes, let me tell you exactly what's going on. The main conflict is with Gaza, that is in the south of Israel. And today there were small, I would say, incidents in Lebanon and in Syria. Right now, Israel has not retaliated. I'm pretty sure that we will probably tonight. But it seems as this is something on the much smaller scale. I don't think that anyone in Syria or Lebanon right now wants to escalate things. And that is good news based on what they see on TV that is happening to the Gaza people in the last few days. And there's something very important that I want to share with you when we talk about that. Israel has been trapped in this Gaza thing for exactly 20 years now. And there's really never a solution for that. Although if you ask me personally, I have all the solutions, precisely, but I'm not the prime minister yet. So what is going on is that we do more of the same. And yesterday we did something that was so smart, was so intelligent, and that really is, I would say, a junction in this war. And what happened is that Israel has deceived everyone. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Has deceived the whole world, including us in Israel, about the plans. On the news, it said that Israel is now invading Gaza with ground troops and tanks and whatnot. And we were like, how did that happen? We didn't even hear about that because we know about everything that's happening. And then short while after that, it was on all the foreign news. And obviously Hamas heard about that as well. So what did they do? As soon as they heard about Israel invading, they all ran down into their underground city, which is what they do. They don't really like to fight face to face. They go dive into the ground. And at that point, 160 Israeli jets came from up above and destroyed all these, bunkers and underground tunnels.
Concurrently with artillery and tanks shelling and Navy ships shelling from the water as well.
So we actually made them create their own grave, and they're saying that there is dozens, maybe even hundreds terrorists buried under this debris, and that is a big blow to Hamas. I mean, they can rave all day about shooting missiles to Israel, but they got a big hit yesterday.
Boaz, I think you bring up a very good point, and that is that you're fighting against terrorists. Tell us who these terrorists are. Tell us about Hamas and Hezbollah, so people will have a better understanding of who the enemy is.
Okay, I will do Hezbollah, and I will leave Hamas to you. Okay, Zvi?
Sure.
All right. So what you need to understand is that it's not all the terror organizations in the world that are the same. Not only they're not, some of them even hate each other. They're like fighting who's more fanatic. So when you hear Hamas, that is in the south, that's Gaza. When you hear Hezbollah, that is in Lebanon in the north. But the main difference between them is not only the geographical location, okay? Hamas is Sunni and Hezbollah is Shiites. So the Shiites, who are a minority in this part of the world, they are being supported by Iran, okay? So they're well trained, the Hezbollah, by Iran, and Iran is shipping tons of ammunition and weapons through Syria into Lebanon and then directly to the hands of Hezbollah. What Israel does in the last few years is that we keep bombing constantly these convoys that try to make their way from Syria to Lebanon, because we tell them we will not allow all these sophisticated weapons get into Lebanon, because eventually they will be fired at us. So this is just for you to understand who Hezbollah is. Now, surprisingly, or if you know the facts good, not surprisingly, that they're not attacking Israel for 15 years now, and that is because of the Lebanon War of 2006. Lebanon War started with Hezbollah kidnapping a few Israeli soldiers. In 1 hour, it turned into a whole-out war, and we fought in Lebanon for about 35 days. That was under George Bush. So he gave us green light. You go take care of business. I'm not going to limit you. I'm not going to stop you. And Israel bombarded Lebanon so hard. But again, we made sure that we're only hurting the terrorists, not civilians, and definitely not Christians. And in the end of that war, Nasrallah, who is the leader of Hezbollah, said, and I give him credit for saying that, because you don't usually hear terrorists admitting, things that happened to them. He said, if I had known that this is going to be Israel's reaction to me kidnapping Israeli soldiers, I wouldn't have done that. So, and since then, he's been quiet, 15 years now. So hopefully that will be a similar situation to Gaza. Go ahead, Zvi.
Quiet, but not sitting and doing nothing. He has rearmed. Hezbollah has gained a lot of experience in other wars, especially in Syria, the civil war, and they've been rearming. And so they're feeling the pulse of Israel right now with the rockets that were fired today, 3 if I'm not mistaken. And the belief is actually that it may not be even Hezbollah, but other insurgents that are doing it, trying to burn up the area.
Mm-hmm.
Having said that, let's move to Hamas. Hamas is another group of terrorists outlawed by the international community. And as Boaz mentioned, they are Sunni Muslims. However, they too are getting support and the blessing and the training and the arming from Iran. Okay? But Hamas is actually a bunch of Palestinians that was formed because they wanted to take over from the corrupt PLO. And the thing is that they got to power. They got to power by a coup. There were actually elections in Gaza. Gaza is sort of like an island, 3 sides surrounded by Israel and 1 side by the Mediterranean. Actually, 1 small area is Egypt, but they are Palestinians that are separate from the West Bank. And one of the things that in 1993, when the Oslo Accords were signed, they wanted to form a Palestinian state. However, they wanted several things. 1, geographical continuance, which would mean to connect Gaza with the West Bank, either you have to do an underground tunnel, an overhead bridge, or to physically divide Israel into 2.
Mm-hmm.
The first 2 options are sort of somehow doable. The third one is, of course, a no-go under no terms that Israel would ever accept. Second thing that they want is Jerusalem, East Jerusalem, to become their capital. And again, something that Israel is not going to ever accept, a divided city once again. And the Palestinians in their manifest still do not recognize Israel's right to exist.
Mhm.
So you have the PLO with whom the accords were signed in 1993, and then in 95 with the killing of Yitzhak Rabin, a lot of the Oslo Accords collapsed. But de facto is that Hamas ended up in coalition in control of Gaza, and then had a coup and totally killed a lot of the PLO people and took over by force and have been the rulers since. There are other smaller factions like Islamic Jihad and others, but they are smaller. The real king of the house is Hamas over there. And they are very militant, very much hold the entire Gaza population hostage, and are totally radical in their way of seeing things. And they are investing millions and billions, not millions, into arming themselves. Now, where do they get this money from? They get it from they get it from Hamas, they get it from Qatar, they get it from other Arab countries that donate it. And those donations supposedly are supposed to be funneled eventually to the people. The thing is that the people, for the most part, do not get it, and the Hamas leadership, is living a luxurious life where the most of the population is not. Now, you guys see a lot of pictures of Gaza in the news, and what you're seeing is true, but it's not the whole truth. There are neighborhoods in Gaza where there are shopping malls and beaches and luxurious homes and people going freely around. The thing is that Hamas, not only do they hold the population hostage, they use them as human shields. They set up their rockets inside hospitals, schools, under the auspices of UNRWA, in ambulances, and they know that Israel, being a very moral country, is not going to attack them because of fear of hurting the innocent civilians. I'll give you an example. We have seen in the news over the last couple of days several high-rise buildings being collapsed. Do you think that somebody has cameras set up in the right angle for every building and every missile that is launched? No. What happens is that a building that 6 of its floors are used for launching rockets and is the headquarters of different units of Hamas and residences of their leaders. So what happens is the Israeli military actually calls every resident in the building, calls them physically on their cell phone. Yeah, we got your number. And tells them, listen, this building is coming down. Get your stuff and get out of there. Now, not only that, then they fire a very tiny missile at the roof of the building. It doesn't penetrate anything, but it makes a lot of noise. That is to tell them, hey, folks, the clock is ticking. Then they have bombs, stun bombs all around to make sure that nobody is actually there. And only after verifying that, jets from different points fire a missile at the building itself concurrently, and the building comes down like a piece of Lego. You cannot choreograph that if it was something spontaneous. Now, Israel has the technology, if we wanted to totally erase Gaza, and not just Gaza, but all the surrounding countries around us, if we wanted to, in a matter of seconds. We don't want to do that. Everything that we do is surgical. We're actually pinpointing a specific person in a specific apartment, in a specific window, at a certain floor, and we know exactly who's going to get hit and when and so on. And that's the way we do it, so as to not damage people. Something else that you probably heard is that the Palestinians launched more than 1,500 rockets at Israel over the last couple of days. What you're not being told is that about 1/3 of those rockets actually land within Gaza itself. So when you hear in the news about a kindergarten and 9 kids that got killed, I can assure you it was not Israel's military that actually hit them. It was one of their own missiles. But of course, that doesn't televise too well. And so that's the situation where we are right now.
A couple questions from some people watching. A pastor here in my area has asked 2 questions. One, what support, and not trying to be political, but just curious, because things have changed politically since January between the United States and Israel. And so what support, if any, has Israel received from the White House or the State Department? Can either of you speak to that?
we over the years made sure and made it very clear that we're not asking for any military to come and help us fight. But the main support that we need is when we purchase, the sophisticated weapons, for instance, from the U.S. We actually exchange, because we sell to the U.S. a lot of technology like the Arrow and the Iron Dome and all that. The main thing that we ask for is to back us up, diplomatically, which means that if this was now under George Bush or Donald Trump, he would have said to Israel, you have all the right to take care of business and get this to justice. So we're not going to limit you. We'll let you have a free hand to deal with it until mission accomplished. I would like to believe that this is also the situation under your new elected president. I doubted that his party will allow him to give Israel so much credit as we had in the last 8 years. So we need to do things quickly before the American president will step in and say enough is enough.
Are there any of all the rockets that have been fired? I know that the Iron Dome is able to catch many of those, but some have gotten through, and we've seen videos of apartment buildings, other things, indiscriminate. So not military targets, civilian targets. Have any historical sites or any holy sites been hit so far as anyone knows?
No. And I want you to know also something about the Iron Dome. Yes, you're right, John, that we don't have 100% success, but the success is over between 90 to 95%. It is so sophisticated, the Iron Dome, that when there's enemy missiles in the air, we don't shoot all of them. We have the sensors that will detect where this missile is going to land. And if the missile is going to land in open space, we just let it go. So because every missile that we shoot is tens of thousands of dollars, and you
$45,000.
Okay, well, you don't need to spare that on something that's not going to make any damage anyway. So like Zvi says, a big bunch of them actually fall in Gaza. They don't even make their way to Israel. Some fall in the ocean. Some make their way to Israel, and that is when the system decides, am I going to take it down because it's going to fall in the heart of Tel Aviv, or I'm just going to let it die somewhere, in a field that doesn't harm anyone.
So let's talk about. Oh, go ahead, Zvi.
We've had up until now, we are standing at 8 casualties at this present moment because of this conflict. The youngest is a 5-year-old boy, and an 87-year-old woman, a Holocaust survivor that managed to survive Auschwitz and actually fell on her face on her way to the safe room, to the bomb shelter, and died because of her injuries in that. In addition, one of those 8 is an Israeli soldier that was hit by an anti-tank missile that was fired at him from close range, close to the border of Gaza and kibbutz that is sitting right on the fence. And that is thanks to the Iron Dome and the rest of the technology that we have. You have to understand that yesterday I was sitting in my house and believed that there's going to be an air raid siren close to me. I saw a lot of orange squares on the TV. Each one pertains to the area where it is expected to fall. And there was actually one very close to the town adjacent to me, but no siren in my town. That's because, as Boaz said, not only could we predict if it's going to fall in an area that is populated or not, we could also predict where it's going to hit, and therefore the air raid siren is selective. It is not something that is throughout the whole country. It's very, very localized. In fact, one of the towns that has been hit quite a lot is Ashdod. And Ashdod has many different neighborhoods. And so it lights up and it says neighborhood 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 12. Okay, it's not even all of them in the entire city. So again, thank God that we have it. And oftentimes people say that Israel uses disproportional strength against the Palestinians. So disproportional strength is easily explained by telling you, hey, listen, you have your daughter get beaten by 3 guys. Okay, now when you come to get them, would you want to have 3 policemen stand against those 3 guys, or would you just rather have 10 policemen and a K9 unit and 2 snipers to make sure that they don't get away when we get them? This is disproportional strength. People have said, yeah, but how could it be the Palestinians have so many casualties, Israel doesn't? Well, Israel invests money in defending its citizens. Hamas invests the money that should go to the citizens in making tunnels, in producing missiles, and in luxurious living for the leaders.
Another question was, who is controlling the news so that things like missiles hitting civilians or rockets hitting civilians are not reported? Now, that one may be a little better for me to attack first because I see that or I witness that. if you watch the major news sources in America, you do not see the things reported on the way that you guys experience them on the ground. We hear about every Palestinian that is injured. We hear about every casualty there. We see we see them on stretchers being carried off and carted off. But there is very little talk about actual civilian injuries or casualties in the land of Israel. Now, I could get into reasons why that happens, but friends, I will just remind everyone that if you look across the history of time, you will find that there has always been a group of people that have been against Israel and against the Jewish people. And God said that he would bless those that bless Israel and curse those that curse Israel. And you are seeing that still going on today, that so many just have a hate for the Jewish people because God made a covenant with them so long ago, and he has not broken that covenant. And I'll leave that at that.
Thank you so much, John, for these kind words. And the best way for me to answer this question, for whoever raises this question, is as follows. What would be the American response to 1,500 missiles being shot from Mexico to California or to Texas? I assure you that the next day, Mexico will turn into powder. Correct me if I'm wrong. And same thing, not only in the US, same thing in France or Britain, any sovereign country that would have been constantly attacked by a terror organization, this terror organization would have been wiped out from the face of the earth. Now, as the Jewish people, we can do that as well. Like Zvi said, we can take them in like a second, but we don't want to do that. We pinpoint them. And by the way, by doing that, we put our soldiers at risk, because if we just bombard them from the air, we don't risk anyone. But like the last operation, and maybe this one too, I don't know how long this is going to last. Eventually, if Israeli soldiers will invade into Gaza, that means that we're going to have lots of casualties as well. And the only reason for that is that we don't want to kill everyone, but just those who are in charge. I guarantee you that there's any army in the world that is even close to us by standards of who you kill, who you don't, who you hurt, who you don't. So no one can lecture us about that.
So we have a few minutes left. One more question, and then Zvi, I want you to talk about something a little bit different. I'm going to change the direction. So you in Israel, dealing with the situation on the ground, where do you see this headed? How does it not necessarily end, but how do we get to a stalemate, an armistice, something to where things can somewhat go back to a normalcy?
First of all, it's a big problem. It's a problem because the majority of Israelis, even from just around the Gaza Strip, the people that only have 15 seconds from the time that they get the air raid siren to the time that the missile hits, 15 seconds. They often have to make a choice if they have a kid playing outside and another baby sleeping in the crib. Who are you going to save? Okay? But even them are saying, for the most part, don't stop. Don't stop right now. You got to keep on, dismantle Hamas. Don't stop now. As we speak, there are already many talks about temporary truce / armistice. Israel up until now has been rejecting it. We don't want to stop. There is a lot of international pressure already on us because Hamas, is first of all, they're like the bully that first of all comes, punches you, then runs away. Okay, so as soon as they start taking hits, and I can tell you, boy, have they taken a hit this last night with what Boaz told you. Israel has pretty much put Hamas down and back in time 15 years right now. And so we don't want to stop. We probably are going to have to at one point. We would much rather continuing, but it's not totally up to us.
So, Zvi, Boaz, we don't have a lot of time left, but I do want to ask. And the other day we saw at least one tree on fire on the Temple Mount, and that escalated things. If they could be escalated more, but could you speak to that? What was that when we saw the Temple Mount on fire? Can you tell us what was going on there?
Yeah, they were actually the Palestinians that were rioting up over there actually threw firecrackers at the police, but it caught fire on the tree, and because it televised, then they made it look, Israel set the Temple Mount on fire. They want to destroy the Mosque of Al-Aqsa. I can tell you, I saw today a movie of a Palestinian funeral, okay? And you see the people carrying the dead, and they're walking through, and all of a sudden there's an air raid siren in Gaza. And they let down the stretcher with the body on it, and they all scuttle for power, for protection, for cover. And then all of a sudden you see the body himself, kind of open up the body bag, unzips it, and he himself gets up and starts running for cover as well. It's all televised, okay? They are whizzes at manipulating the media.
And I think that's an excellent point. Zvi, Boaz, if we can, I want to change directions just a little. Thank you for answering your questions. Everyone, thank you for asking these questions. But today is a very important day. Today is May 14th. And on May 14th, 1948, something very special happened that leads us into TourMeApp and a video that we want to premiere here before we leave today. Before we end this broadcast, we want to show you this. So, Zvi, please.
As you said, 73 years ago, Friday at 4 p.m. in Tel Aviv, David Ben-Gurion declares Israel's independence. It had to be done as late as possible because at midnight, the British mandate ends. But on the other hand, it's Friday afternoon, and Shabbat is about to set. There's no daylight saving hours at that time yet. And they convene in Tel Aviv at 4 p.m., just exactly when we started this live, 4 p.m. Eastern. And David Ben-Gurion declares independence to the state of Israel. Immediately after, people in Tel Aviv and throughout the country go out to the streets dancing, and moments later, we are already being attacked by 7 invading armies that converted the War of Independence from sort of like a gangs against distant settlements to a full-scale 7 armies invading Israel all at once. And God's people, as you can see, are still around. And that leads us to TourMeApp. And as you said, TourMeApp is something amazing that we have come up with in order to facilitate to everybody to be able to see all the places that they've dreamed about, learned about, always wanted to visit, heard about throughout their youth, but not necessarily have had the opportunity to come here and we want to make everybody able to see those places. So if you can come to Israel, we're going to bring Israel to you. So Boaz and myself and my wife and Jonathan and a few others are working avidly on producing an app that will allow you to actually experience it, and it'll be the second best experience to actually being here. We're really working very hard on making you feel like you're with us while we're shooting. We're working extremely hard. It's going to be very high quality. What we're going to show you right now is actually the premiere, the very first segment. And I chose particularly the one that we're going to show you today because of today's date. And I also want to tell you that we are launching the app in November and are right now carrying on a crowdfunding pre-sale, and we need everybody's assistance. We really need you to back us up, friends, and help us with buying a subscription. There are several different types of subscriptions on our website, and I can assure you, A, you're going to love it, B, you're not going to regret it, and C, till November, we're going to fill you with so many good stuff. So if you haven't yet, you need to subscribe to our YouTube channel, like and follow us on Instagram, on Facebook, and primarily share the word, friends, because we don't want just you to have it. We want everybody to have it. Jonathan?
You ready? All right.
I'm ready.
Here we go.
And this place right here is the corner of Herzl and Rothschild. So this is it. This is the place. This is the first two streets of Tel Aviv. This is where Tel Aviv started. In 1909, a group of Jews headed by Mayor Dizengoff decided to leave the protection of the walls of Jaffa and head out towards the sand dunes to the north. They came here, where I'm standing, and here it all began. Come. Every vision begins with a dream. And those dreamers that envisioned Tel Aviv, the first 70 founding families, their names are inscribed here in this plaque. This site right here is basically where it all began. And Tel Aviv, from a bunch of sand dunes with nothing on them, became the lively, modern city that we have today. The largest metropolitan area in all of Israel, and the second largest city in Israel. The building that we're about to see played a very important role in the founding of the State of Israel. This is Israel's Hall of Independence. Try to imagine it as it was and as it will be when they're done with this project of restoration, a grand structure in the terms of modest little tiny Israel. The Hall of Independence was actually the house of Meir Dizengoff, one of 70 of the founding families that founded Tel Aviv. And they drew lots, and he just happened to get this. He also became the very first mayor of Tel Aviv. And following the death of his wife, Tzina, he donated the building to the city so as to be the Tel Aviv Art Museum. 1948, on May 14th, Friday, late afternoon, a very important meeting took place here. And things had to be finished before 4:30 because of the onset of Shabbat. But at the same time, had to be done at the latest possible moment so that nobody would know about it beforehand, because by midnight, the British mandate would come to its end. We had a very tiny window of opportunity that we had to take advantage of. And so David Ben-Gurion decided, in spite of threats of the Arab nations surrounding us, that they will invade us if we declare independence, he decided to go ahead with the plan. And secretly, invitations were sent out 2 days in advance, and we improvised by taking seats from the surrounding cafes so that people and the delegates would have where to sit. David Ben-Gurion read out the Declaration of Independence.
אנו מכריזים בזאת על הקמת מדינה יהודית בארץ ישראל. היא מדינת ישראל.
And immediately, people broke out in the streets dancing for a very short-lived period of happiness, because immediately after, we were attacked by 7 invading Arab nations, tried to exterminate us, yet we are still here. I'd like to point out this statue here of a man riding a horse, and it's a play of words. This is Mayor riding his mare, Meira. Mayor Dizengoff, the first mayor of Tel Aviv, riding his horse named Meira. Come along.
Thank you all for tuning in today. Before we leave, when I was on tour with Boaz, Boaz every morning would teach us some Hebrew, or in the evening, throughout the day, on our trips. Boaz, before we leave, it's very, very late. I think it's after midnight for you guys now.
Yeah.
It's 5 o'clock Eastern time here in the States, and so it's getting to be evening. Would you tell us all how to say good evening in Hebrew?
Of course. Let me teach you 2 words. Good evening is Erev Tov. Say that, John. Erev Tov.
Erev Tov.
Very good. And something that's even more important that we say now, today, this evening, is Shabbat Shalom. That's how Jews will greet each other before the Shabbat begins. So, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
By the way, we have on our YouTube channel and on our social media, we have Hebrew word of the day that we teach you. So make sure you subscribe and catch up on all things that we've already done, and stay tuned to all things that we will be doing.
And everyone, if you will, let us know in the comments what you like, what you dislike, what we can improve. If you thought this was interesting and you would like for us to do it again, please let us know in the comments, and share this afterwards with your friends and let them know what is going on with TourMeApp and how they can learn more about Israel and the Holy Land and what is going on current events wise. Thank you so much. Good evening. Erev Tov.
Erev Tov.
Laila Tov, actually.
Laila
now,
Tov, yes.
Laila Tov means good night.
להתראות.
Okay.
Bye.
Goodbye.